June 6, 1944. At 07 hours north of Carentan, Normandy, Obergefreiter Rudolf Thiel struck a match to light his cigarette. The glow trembled in his hand as a low, distant sound reached his ears, the drone of aircraft engines. At first faint, it quickly swelled into a thunderous roar. Within minutes, Thiel was frantically turning the crank on his field telephone. His call, logged at exactly 1 hours, became the first German report of what would soon be recognized as the largest airborne assault in military history. That night, 13,348 American paratroopers, supported by 3,937 American glider troops and thousands of British and Canadian airborne soldiers, dropped behind German lines. Yet the warning from Thiel marked only the beginning of what would turn into a massive German intelligence failure. On paper, German defenses in Normandy seemed formidable. The 91st Luftlandedivision Infantry Division, under Generalleutnant Wilhelm Falle, held the Cotentin Peninsula with 12,000 men. The 709th Static Infantry Division, commanded by Generalleutnant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, defended the eastern coast, including the beaches later known as Utah, with 12,320 troops. The experienced 302nd Infantry Division, under Generalleutnant Dietrich Kreis, controlled the Omaha sector with another 12,000 men. Most notably, the elite 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, Germany's own paratroopers, had been brought in to reinforce the line. This regiment, 4,500 strong and led by Major Friedrich August Freiherr von der Heydte, consisted mostly of 17-year-olds, but their training made them some of the best soldiers in the Wehrmacht. The German High Command had long expected an airborne assault. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel himself had supervised the planting of over 1 million wooden poles, nicknamed Rommel's asparagus, across open fields to block gliders and snare parachutes. Standing 4 to 5 meters tall and placed 23 to 30 meters apart, these obstacles were everywhere. By April 1944, one corps alone had emplaced nearly 900,000 stakes. Yet on the night of June 5th, Rommel was not in Normandy. He was in Germany celebrating his wife Lucy's birthday, convinced bad weather made an invasion impossible. At 07 hours on June 6th, the war arrived suddenly for Obergefreiter Gustav Prinitz of the 13th Company, Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6, stationed near Saint-Honoré-du-Père. Woken by shouts of "Alarm! Parachutes! Gliders!" he stumbled outside just in time to see an American paratrooper dangling helplessly from a tree. The man's leg was broken and he groaned in English, Oh, broken leg." Prinitz disarmed him and later recalled, he was probably the first American prisoner of war of the Battle of Normandy. Similar encounters unfolded across German positions. Jürgen Graser of the 2nd Battalion later remembered the young Americans as big, strong boys maybe 20 years old, carrying canned rations, chewing gum, chocolate, spare ammunition, pin-up pictures, and even explosives stuffed into their pockets. By 01:30 hours, General der Artillerie Erich Marx, commander of Elix Kringwerkswehr Corps, received the first organized reports of paratroopers landing between Sainte-Mère-Église and Carentan. At 53 years old, having lost a leg on the Eastern Front, Marx immediately grasped the danger. But the situation looked confusing. The drops were scattered, with no obvious concentration on a single objective. German doctrine assumed airborne troops would seize clear targets, but these Americans seemed to be everywhere at once. Marx ordered a Kampfgruppe from the 9th and 15th Grenadier Regiment, positioned south of Carentan, to investigate. It was a costly mistake. The unit spent the entire night stumbling through narrow Norman lanes, chasing false reports. By the time they received accurate information around 07:00 hours, they were exhausted, disorganized, and far from where they were needed most. Meanwhile, the German command system unraveled. Generaloberst Friedrich Dahlmann, head of the 7th Army, was in Rennes conducting a war game exercise about how to respond to an Allied invasion of Normandy, ironically as the real invasion was beginning. At around 04 hours, Generalleutnant Wilhelm Falle, commander of the 91st Division, made a fateful decision. After hearing aircraft engines overhead, he ordered his driver to return him to his headquarters. As his staff car sped through the darkness near Château de Berneville, it ran into a patrol from the 82nd Airborne Division. Lieutenant Malcolm D. Brannan of the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment opened fire, killing Falle instantly. He became the first German general to die on D-Day. German communications quickly collapsed. Radio sets produced only static, Telephone lines were cut by paratroopers and commanders were left in the dark. Oberleutnant Martin Dietrich, communications officer of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, later said, "Nothing worked. The radios gave only static. The telephone lines were cut everywhere. In desperation, I even tried the French civilian system, and to my surprise, it worked." The resistance didn't sabotage French property. German radar fared no better. Beginning at 23 hours on June 5th, Allied jamming crippled stations from Cherbourg to Le Havre. The key Luftwaffe radar at Douvres de Dives lost its antennas entirely when Allied naval gunfire smashed them at dawn. Meanwhile, powerful transmitters codenamed Bagpipe and Chatter in England filled German frequencies with fake traffic, drowning out real signals. By the morning of June 6th, chaos reigned. Thousands of paratroopers were on the ground. Communications were broken. Commanders were dead or missing, and the German defensive system in Normandy was already unraveling before the first Allied troops hit the beaches. On February 1944, Adolf Hitler made a decision that crippled German intelligence. He dissolved the Abwehr, the Wehrmacht's own intelligence agency, after learning its chief admiral Wilhelm Canaris was secretly working against the Nazi regime. The Abwehr's role was handed over to the SS Reich Main Security Office, where political loyalty mattered more than skill. At first light on June 6th, Major Friedrich von der Heydte, commander of Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6, began his own investigation. A veteran of Crete, where German paratroopers had suffered devastating losses, von der Heydte understood airborne warfare better than nearly any German officer in Normandy. By 60 hours in Carentan, he personally interrogated captured American paratroopers. What he learned shocked him. These weren't just small commando raids. These were full divisions, the 82nd and 101st Airborne. Von der Heydte later wrote in his memoirs how impressed he was with the American Pathfinders. They had shaved their heads into mohawks, painted their faces in green and brown camouflage, and carried advanced gear. His staff officer, Hauptmann Trappes, famously remarked, "Now they are sending us their Indians." Each American paratrooper carried between 70 and 120 pounds of equipment. Their main parachutes were backed up by reserve chutes, something German paratroopers never had. They carried the M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle, firing 8 rounds as fast as a soldier could pull the trigger. By contrast, most German infantry were still issued the bolt-action Karabiner 98K. Americans had multiple flashlights with extra batteries, morphine syrettes for instant pain relief, and rations that included chocolate, chewing gum, and cigarettes. They even carried cricket clickers, small metal devices used for identification in darkness. Many Germans mocked these as children's toys, not realizing that only a country with enormous resources could issue such tools to every single soldier. The small French town of Sainte-Mère-Église, with just 2,500 people, became a key battleground. It lay on Route Nationale 13, the main road between Cherbourg and Carentan, making it vital for German counterattacks. Its garrison was just 41 men from the 91st Infantry Division, supported by unreliable Eastern European conscripts. Their weapons included 2 anti-aircraft guns and a few machine guns. At 4:30 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Krauss of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment launched an attack with only 30 to 40 men he could gather from scattered drops. By 5 hours, Krauss had raised the American flag over the town hall. The German garrison had collapsed, 30 captured, 11 killed. Later that morning, elements of the 158th Regiment counterattacked from positions near Fauville, 2 kilometers to the south. They had concealed 88mm guns that turned the southern approaches into deadly ground. Between 08:30 and noon on June 6th, First Lieutenant Richard Winters led a now famous small unit action at Bricourt Manor. The Germans had 4 105mm howitzers manned by about 60 soldiers from the Fallschirmjäger Regiment. Winters had only 17 men at the start, later reinforced to 24. Using fire and maneuver tactics, they eliminated every gun and captured a complete map case showing German positions across the Cotentin Peninsula. American losses: 4 killed, 6 wounded. German losses: 15 killed, 12 wounded, 23 captured. At La Fière Bridge over the Murderat River, historian S.L.A. Marshall later wrote of the bloodiest small unit struggle in the history of American arms. A company of the 505th captured the bridge at 09 to Cairn on D-Day, but at 16 at dawn hours, German forces struck back. Elements of the 1057th Grenadier Regiment, with 3 captured French tanks counterattacked. Shockingly, they forced captured American paratroopers to march in front of their armor as human shields. The battle for Lafayette Bridge raged for 3 days. One company suffered an 86% casualty rate, 46 killed and 81 wounded out of 147 men. The 91st Luftlandedivision Division lost 2,212 men in just the first 6 days of fighting for the bridge. German intelligence had utterly failed. The 82nd and 101st Airborne had been training in England for over 2 years. Their massive exercises went unnoticed. Even the marshalling of 822 C-47 transport planes escaped detection. The Allies painted bold black and white invasion stripes on every aircraft, yet German observers still failed to report them. German doctrine assumed airborne troops would land far behind the front, striking deep at strategic targets, just as they themselves had done in Holland and Crete. They could not imagine the Allies would drop paratroopers only a few miles from the beaches, using them as shock infantry to secure the landing zones. In fact, the Germans had expected such an assault. The 91st Luftlandedivision Division was moved to Normandy in May 1944, reinforced with Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6. A third of the troops were kept ready in potential landing zones day and night. Yet they were still taken by surprise when the invasion came. Adding to the confusion was Operation Titanic, a brilliant deception plan. The Allies dropped 400 dummy paratroopers, small figures made of Hessian cloth, some rigged with small explosives and noisemakers. Entire German regiments were fooled. The 915th Grenadier Regiment abandoned beach defenses to chase shadows in the woods. Even the elite 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend was diverted to counter phantom paratroopers near Lisieux, nothing more than dummies. This combination of American innovation, German overconfidence, and devastating intelligence failures ensured that by the end of D-Day, the airborne assault had played a decisive role in securing the Allied beachheads and beginning the end of Nazi Germany. This elite German unit, which might have influenced the fight at Omaha Beach had it been deployed early, spent the morning of D-Day chasing enemies that didn't exist. In an after-action report dated June 20th, German officers admitted, "In several locations the paratroopers turned out to be dummies, equipped with explosives. Their purpose was to divide our reserves and pull them away from vital positions." As dawn rose on June 6th, German soldiers began to see the true technological gap between themselves and their opponents. American paratroopers carried SCR-536 handy-talkie radios, allowing squads to communicate directly on the battlefield. German infantry still relied on runners or signal flags. The Americans were armed with the M1 Garand rifle, which fired 8 rounds quickly, while most Germans carried the bolt-action Karabiner 98K, a design dating back to the 1890s. Medical gear shocked the Germans even more. Every American carried sulfanilamide powder and morphine syrettes for immediate use. Their medics had blood plasma ready for field treatment, something German forces hadn't seen in years. Their K-rations contained not only canned meat, crackers, and chocolate, but also chewing gum and cigarettes. To German soldiers surviving on black bread and ersatz coffee, this looked like limitless abundance. Werner Kortenhaus of the 21st Panzer Division, who fought British paratroopers around the bridges, later reflected, "We were still a horse-drawn army pretending to be mechanized. They were truly mechanized. When I saw American paratroopers eating chocolate under fire, smoking cigarettes without concern and treating wounds with medicines we had not seen since 1942, I knew the war was lost." The German armored response revealed just how broken their command system had become. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armored force immediately available, wasn't cleared to move until noon on D-Day. Hitler had kept personal control over all armored divisions, and he was asleep at his mountain retreat. His staff hesitated to wake him. When General Major Edgar Feuchtinger finally received permission at 16:20 hours, his division was scattered across Normandy chasing false paratrooper reports. Of the 124 tanks that moved into action, 70 were destroyed or disabled by day's end, wrecked by naval gunfire, fighter bombers, and bazooka teams. Hardly any were stopped by American tanks, which had not yet landed in large numbers. Throughout June 6th, German units found themselves increasingly cut off. At 10 cat hours, General Erich Marx told his division commanders, "The fate of Germany in this war depends on your counterattack." Yet orders often took hours to reach frontline units. Some never arrived at all. The Wehrmacht's doctrine of Auftragstactic, mission-type orders designed to encourage initiative, collapsed when junior officers didn't even know what their objectives were. With communications broken, units tried to defend beaches, hunt paratroopers, and hold ground all at once, achieving none effectively. Major Friedrich von der Heydtes Fallschirmjägerregiment 6 demonstrated this breakdown clearly. His men were scattered over 30 square miles. The 1st Battalion was destroyed while retreating toward Carentan. The 2nd Battalion was pinned down near Saint-Côme-du-Mont. The 3rd Battalion virtually disappeared. Von der Heydte only discovered after the war that they had been surrounded and captured almost intact. Ironically, the scattered American drops, which had seemed like a disaster at first, turned into a major advantage. Only 1 in 6 paratrooper groups landed near their intended drop zones, with some off by more than 20 miles. Instead of being concentrated and easy to contain, the Americans appeared everywhere. German intelligence even estimated 20,000 to 25,000 American paratroopers had landed, almost double the actual 13,348. These small, aggressive groups attacked whatever they found, giving German commanders the impression they faced a much larger force. By noon, the Germans had captured several hundred American paratroopers. But interrogations only confirmed their fears. These were not small raiding parties. They were the leading wave of an invasion involving millions of soldiers. Feldwebel Ernst Wagner, assigned to guard prisoners near Carentan, wrote in his diary about their unshakable confidence. Wounded Americans received treatment with plasma, morphine, and sulfa drugs, supplies German hospitals hadn't seen in over a year. Meanwhile, on the eastern flank, the British 6th Airborne Division had an equally dramatic impact. Landing 8,500 men by parachute and glider, they seized vital bridges over the Orne River and the Caen Canal. Major Hans von Luck's Kampfgruppe from the 21st Panzer Division received reports of landings as early as 01:30 hours, but like Feuchtinger, he could not get permission to attack for 8 hours. By then, British positions were secure and supported by naval gunfire. The glider assault on Pegasus Bridge was particularly shocking. 6 Horsa gliders landed within yards of their target, delivering troops who captured the bridge in just 10 minutes. German defenders, positioned miles behind what they thought was the front line, were completely overwhelmed. After the war, von der Heydte's analysis of the Americans was blunt. The quality of the American paratroopers who fought us was outstanding. Their training, weapons, and equipment were first class. The 101st Airborne Division, and especially the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, surpassed all others. German soldiers were stunned by American flexibility. While Fallschirmjäger were trained to follow detailed plans, Americans thrived in chaos, forming ad hoc groups and striking targets of opportunity. The statistics underline the scale of the operation. The Allies used 822 American C-47 transport aircraft, carrying 13,348 paratroopers and 3,037 glider troops. The British and Canadians added 8,500 more. In total, about 25,185 Allied airborne troops were committed. German losses were staggering. The 91st Luftlandedivision Division lost 8,000 men from its 12,000, about 67%. Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6 lost 3,000 of its 4,500 men, the same 67% loss rate. By the end of the first week, it was clear. The Allied airborne forces had broken German defenses, not only with their weapons and training, but with their sheer ability to adapt and fight under any conditions. The airborne operations of D-Day caused devastating losses to German forces. Around 5,000 American casualties came at a cost of nearly 16,000 German losses, most of them directly tied to airborne actions. These heavy blows fell especially on elite units and, unlike the Allies, Germany had no way to replace them. Their airborne forces could not be rebuilt. Training schools were gone and transport aircraft were in short supply. By contrast, the United States replaced its 2,499 D-Day airborne casualties within weeks. From a tactical standpoint, the operation looked messy. Many paratroopers missed their drop zones. Casualties were high and objectives were often delayed. But when viewed strategically, the mission was a complete success. The Germans were unable to organize an effective defense of the invasion beaches, and for the critical first 48 hours, their decision-making was paralyzed. General Heinrich Ebuck, who later commanded Panzer Group West, summed it up. The Allied airborne operations on D-Day were decisive. Not in the tactical sense. Many goals were not achieved immediately. But operationally, they stopped us from carrying out our defensive plans. German intelligence had failed across the board. They had not detected the creation of American airborne divisions, the 2-year training effort, the assembly of hundreds of transport aircraft, or even the painting of the black and white invasion stripes. Operation Fortitude, the Allied deception plan, worked so well that the German 15th Army, 150,000 men strong, remained idle in the Pas-de-Calais until late July, waiting for an invasion that never came. Some German officers had tried to sound the alarm. Colonel Alexis von Roroa of Foreign Armies West submitted accurate assessments before D-Day, but Hitler and his staff ignored his reports, clinging instead to their own assumptions. The shock of D-Day's airborne landings carried forward through the rest of the war. German commanders constantly feared new drops, holding back reserves that could have been used at the front. When the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich was ordered north from southern France to reinforce Normandy, the trip should have taken 3 days. Instead, it lasted 2 weeks. Sabotage by resistance fighters slowed them, but the constant fear of parachute attacks delayed them even more. This caution was reinforced by Operation Market Garden in September 1944, when the Allies dropped 3.5 divisions in broad daylight. Even though the operation ultimately failed, it confirmed Germany's worst fears about airborne warfare and helped accelerate the Allied push across France. What D-Day's airborne operations truly represented was a shift in military power. They showed that elite combat skills no longer belonged only to professional soldiers. The German Fallschirmjäger had been carefully selected, many from families with long military traditions. By contrast, the American paratroopers were ordinary citizens, farmers, factory workers, and students who volunteered for $50 a month in jump pay. Yet these men fought with such initiative and toughness that they often outmatched seasoned German troops with far more battlefield experience. Their motivation was different too. They weren't fighting for empire or prestige. They fought to finish the war and return home. Franz Gockel, a teenage machine gunner who defended Omaha Beach and later moved to America, admitted, "The paratroopers changed everything. We were prepared to defend the beaches, but when we heard paratroopers had landed behind us, the fear set in. Were we surrounded? Should we retreat?" They won the battle before the first landing craft touched the shore. Another German veteran, Erich Bisso, who attended reconciliation events in 2014, recalled, "I saw them drop straight into our positions. For the men under those parachutes, it was terrible, but for us it was even worse." As the sun set on June 6th, the battlefield was unrecognizable. Field Marshal von Rundstedt reported to Hitler that night, "The enemy has succeeded in creating confusion in our rear areas through extensive airborne landings. The scale and coordination exceed our previous estimates." But Hitler refused to release his reserves, convinced the main invasion would still come at Pas-de-Calais. On June 7th, the 17th, SS Panzer Grenadier Division spent the day clearing supposed paratrooper positions instead of striking the beaches. By the time they were finally ready, American forces had already secured strong inland positions. The chance to drive them back was gone. After the war, Major von der Heide gave his professional judgment in military journals. He wrote that the American airborne assault was more than just a military mission. It was the display of a new kind of national power. The United States had shown it could transform ordinary young men into elite soldiers, plan and execute complex operations on a global scale, and sustain them with unmatched industrial production. As he put it, "We Germans believed ourselves to be the masters of modern war. We created blitzkrieg, pioneered airborne tactics, and developed combined arms warfare. But the Americans industrialized these concepts, democratized them, and carried them out at a level we never imagined." The 13,348 American paratroopers who jumped into Normandy changed the course of history. They proved that free nations could build military power equal to or greater than dictatorships. They showed that citizen soldiers could stand against professional warriors and win. On the night of June 5th to 6th, 1944, German defenders heard the roar of hundreds of aircraft. They saw thousands of parachutes filling the sky. They fought scattered groups of determined Americans across Normandy, and they realized the 1,000-year Reich had picked a fight it could not win. The airborne assault on Normandy signaled the rise of a new kind of warfare, one built on democracy, industry, and innovation. By dawn on June 7th, German soldiers knew the truth. Behind the Atlantic Wall, American paratroopers held the ground, broke communications, and blocked reinforcements. The landing of 13,348 American paratroopers behind their lines had not just shaped the outcome of D-Day. It had begun the end of Nazi Germany.